Sony announces a brand new lens. What is good, everybody? It's that one camera guy back at again with a talking head video for you, going over my thoughts and impressions about the finally and officially announced Sony 400 F2.8. First of all, this lens has already been mentioned. It's already been brought up. Everyone sort of already knew that this lens was going to show up around the summer of 2018, and it looks as though the official release time is going to be in September. Pre-orders will start sometime this week, so it's a very, very exciting time for Sony, and here's the reason why. Up until now, Sony hasn't had any large aperture telephoto lenses, so I pretty much own, I think, every single telephoto zoom lens from Sony. So they have the 70-200 f4, this little guy here, really good lens. I had a video on which zoom lens you should buy. Then Sony came around with the 70-200 f2.8 G Master, started getting a little more serious about that. And during this time frame, Sony added a couple of extenders. So they added in a 1.4x and also a 2.2x teleconverter, which is very limited on the actual lenses you can use it for. And by the way, the 400 2.8 can use the teleconverters. Now, with regards to the overall quality, it's just, we'll see what happens with that. And then finally, Sony added in the 100-400 G Master, which I was really hesitant in personally buying, because it was pretty much an f5.6 lens, but I've actually really enjoyed using it. I've gotten amazing results, and even with Sony's cameras at higher ISOs, the lens still performs great. It's sharp, it's tack sharp, especially when you hit that subject. It looks really, really good. And so seeing the track record Sony has had with these particular lenses, you could imagine that the 400 2.8 is going to be an amazing lens. So the next thing I want to go over is price point. This lens comes in at $12,000 US. It's not a lens that just anyone is going to buy, and I know there's going to be a lot of kind of frustration because of that price point, but you have to really look and consider what the competition is offering. Canon is offering their lens for close to $10,000. It's pretty much that point. Nikon sells theirs for $11,000, and Sony has theirs positioned at $12,000. You could argue and say, man, Canon's is much cheaper and Nikon is relatively cheaper, but you also have to think about the camera body that you're pairing up your camera with. And I think retail now, the Sony A9 is going for about $3,750. Am I wrong on that? Maybe it's like $4,000 or so. And you compare to the competition, which is retailing close to $6,000 roughly. And you can definitely get these for a lot cheaper if you just shop around for them. So if you combine the savings of it, for example, you save $2,000 on the A9 compared to a 1DX Mark II, you sort of bridge the price gap between those, between that kit that you're going to buy. So that's how I would look at the price point. It's an investment, especially if you're doing sports, wildlife. It's really not going to be the folks who are sort of just your hobbyists. I mean, if you have a lot of cash to burn, it's one of those kind of lenses you would end up picking up, and you're going to get tremendous results. But who is it really for, right? It's kind of a pigeonhole to those specific individuals. So why, again, going back into this lens discussion, when the A9 first came out, it was a technological marvel in my opinion, and I was excited about it when it first came out, and also very excited when I did have it. Yeah, there was the overheating deal in the boggle, but aside from that, the 20 frames per second, the anti-distortion, the silent shooting, the fast autofocusing system on here, and the deep buffer that you could get out of this just made this a remarkable tool, especially for sports photography, which I do a lot of. Is it overkill for me? Yeah, absolutely. But hey, if I can capture the perfect shot or capture that perfect moment, I want to have that option available to me. And so the Sony A9 definitely gave that ability, and I know the same case for a lot of other people out there who have the A9. What's interesting is Sony actually dropped a new firmware, so I guess the firmware announcement came first, and then the 400 f2.8 announcement was officially made. So there was a lot of improvements on the A9 with the firmware updates, saying you're obviously going to get compatibility now with the 400 2.8. You're going to get faster autofocusing, better tracking in low light, for example. So there's a lot of under the hood features that are being advanced in this A9, which is a good thing. There are still some things that they neglected to put in, which is the star rating option, and again, the picture profiles, which I've mentioned before. But I digress. That is the current situation with the 400 2.8. And the question I was trying to answer is whether or not I'm going to get the 400 F2.8. And for me, it's a bit overkill. I think even for what I do, the 400 2.8 will get me by for a lot of the use cases that I do. And I don't really mind shooting at the higher ISOs like 25,600 if I really have to. You know, and I still got the 70-200 F2.8 for indoor stuff if I need that. What's going to happen is, more than likely, I'll try to get a loaner for the 400 2.8 to test and try it out in the fall when it's finally available, and then maybe consider a purchase the following year. So 2019 maybe. I'll just have to, you know, move budgets around and what have you and make accommodations for it and sell some things for sure if I'm looking to pick up the 400 2.8, because that thing is going to be such a gem, especially for those of us that shoot sports a lot. And I guess, again, for those of you that are looking into wildlife, that's going to be an amazing piece of glass. So that's my thoughts on this. One more thing I want to mention is discussion about the weight savings. The Canon and the Nikon are closely, I think they're about 8 pounds or so, a little over 8 pounds. And then the 400 2.8 from Sony is going to clock in about 6.4, 6.5 pounds or so. And it's funny because I've been using this lens ever since I was using a Canon camera. And this is the Sigma 120-300. It clocks in at about 7.5 pounds. Now, these aren't lenses you want to handhold for a long period of time. And for me, I'm not shooting like an 8-hour day. I might shoot for 3 hours at most, 4 hours at the highest when it comes to a sporting event. And I've handheld this with my Canon cameras and even the Sony A9 when I was using it. It's doable, but obviously if you're smaller frame, then it can get really heavy to hold and you're going to get definitely exhausted. So I can understand the need for a monopod, but I am excited about the weight savings on the 400 2.8, considering that it's going to come in just a pound lighter than this, which I'm pretty used to hand-holding already. So yeah, just let me know. I'm curious in the comments below for those of you specifically interested in getting this lens. If money was no object, would you add it to your arsenal? I mean, I think that's a pretty stupid question. Who wouldn't want to add it to your arsenal? But to just have the Sony A9 autofocusing system, the power behind it in this particular setup with the 400 2.8, it's going to produce some amazing images. Oh man, it is very, very interesting. So Sony is definitely getting very serious in this market, and it looks like we're going to start seeing some more telephoto zoom lenses. So Canon and Nikon, I'm hoping they respond. So that's going to do it for me in this video. Make sure you check out my previous video over here where I did a collaboration with Kitty, aka Atola Visuals, and Jason Bong when we went on our trip to VidCon. It was really, really fun, so make sure you check that video out. And with that said, I'm your host, That One Camera Guy, and I will catch you on the next video. Peace.